Welcome back to another Culture Northumberland podcast with me, Claire Venus. I'm so delighted to be speaking to Rebecca today. Rebecca and I have met in real life once, very, very briefly. We were both really, really busy with other project work. So I'm so excited to reconnect with Rebecca, find out how things have been since she moved to Northumberland and what's been going on in her career, and all of the ambitious plans. I know you've got lots of ambitious plans. Rebecca, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are in the world?
Sure. Thanks, Claire. So I describe myself as a development consultant. So I support leaders across the country and in different sectors, a lot in local government, doing sort of executive coaching and senior leadership training and development, visioning, a whole range of things, but also not-for-profit sectors, art and culture and all of that. Support organisations with their development, how they want to grow, how they want to move forward. And that might be a corporate county council, but it's also I'm doing a lot with creative enterprises. I work with this organisation called MeWe 360, which has got MBO status from the Arts Council, to really start to think about how creative entrepreneurs, particularly from Black and Brown communities, are able to grow and develop as leaders, but also grow their businesses. So I'm a mentor with that organisation, which is really amazing and really inspiring. But I also develop partnerships. So I've done a lot of partnership work over my career. Originally, a long time ago, I was the chief exec of a YMCA, and I did a lot of partnership work there and understood the power of it. And then I did more strategic partnership development. So again, some time ago now, I was the coordinator of the Cultural Quarter in London, which worked with some of the big international organisations like the Tate and the South Bank Centre, Imperial War, but also small businesses and local government, and understanding how there's crossover in all that they do. And that created different dynamics and opportunities for understanding and potential developments. And then other partnerships are, in Bristol, I helped develop Bristol as the first UNESCO learning city in England. And UNESCO learning cities are all over the world in about 160 countries. And so Bristol decided it wanted to develop as that. And what that meant was really big strategic players, from the mayor's team to universities to schools, but also businesses, understanding what the power of learning is, which attracted inward investment, as well as raising aspirations and expectations. So my sense of the partnership working I've been involved in, it can really tackle systemic challenges. And also within the arts world, it can open up new possibilities. And that's what really excites me about that collaborative approach. It means that you can do stuff that you can't do on your own, and it opens up a whole new world.
Incredible. Wow, it's so lovely to hear so much about your background and what the driving forces were there, and some incredibly powerful cultural players. But like you say, those smaller businesses that also have influence and people coming together in a new way to kind of go, this is the fabric of this place. What do we want it to be and what do we want to create? And so you have relocated to the Northeast, is that correct?
Yeah, so I'm in. You might hear builders at the moment. I've literally just moved into a new house in Amble, just a small cottage that's just been developed. So yeah, I moved from London to Amble a year ago. So I came last February. Yeah, and I'm now in the process of moving in, unpacking boxes, literally.
Welcome. Well,
Thank
welcome
you.
to Northumberland. Welcome to the Northeast. Welcome to Amble. I adore Amble. I absolutely adore it as a
Yeah, it's
place. I think it
gorgeous.
is a
Yeah.
wonderful place to spend time. There's been a little bit of a regenerational set of things going on, and them really adjusting how they serve tourists as well. I mean, they did that pre-pandemic anyway, but there's been a new push post-pandemic, and we've really felt that as locals. I'm very local to Amble myself. What's been really interesting as well is to hear more from Luke McTaggart, who was obviously based in Amble, grew up in Amble, very passionate about the town, very passionate about bringing culture to the doorstep and understanding his cultural roots and what might be possible kind of further down the line. I wonder, with your work, Rebecca, do you feel like there is potential for it to be focused in a specific place? Is it Amble? Is it wider than that? Have you had kind of thoughts bubble up? I know you're speaking to a lot of artists and you've spent time
Yeah.
thinking about what might be a good fit.
Yeah. So I guess, I mean, when I came, because I'm a throughout my work, I'm a creative thinker, so I don't produce, I'm not a painter or anything like that, but I really thrive on creativity, and that really helps me with myself, but also my work. And so I was really keen. I could feel that there were a lot of creative people around the area. So I wanted to go and find them, but I couldn't find them. I didn't know where they were. It was really hidden under the radar, but I could just tell there was something around. And so I just kept talking to people, and I found them in pockets, and I, and then I stumbled across the old bathhouse, which is just on the outskirts of Amble, and all those studios, and found it. This is, really had that dynamism. So many people were coming to their open studios from all over the county and the region. And then, of course, as we know, that's now sort of moving away due to the physical lease issues with the studio spaces. So that's changing. So I was trying to find that, and I think there's so much great stuff going on, but it's done in pockets and it's done individually. So there's no one sort of really starting to think about the whole. And I guess my background is very much sort of grassroots and vision coming together, and how you draw that, and also rooted in place. So, we know that there's really amazing stuff going on in Hexham, in Blythe, in Berwick, but that big block in the middle doesn't seem to have any sort of strategic coordination. So I guess my work means that you can just do it on a small scale, you can do it regionally, you can do it as a county. There's so much potential, because it's that idea of, if you bring people together, people can only see things from their own perspective, their own experience. If you bring people together and you have that capacity for openness and listening and understanding, you can then start to broaden your perspective and encompass other people's viewpoints, and then you gradually start to have a much bigger overview, a sense of possibility. And for me, like I'm sure it's the same for you and all the other artists in the area, the power of culture transcends just an exhibition. It transcends everything. It transcends that sense of place, that ambition, expectation, culture, in its broadest sense. It impacts on community health, the regeneration. It has so much power. If we just limit it to what we know and we don't join it up, for me, we're missing that sense of possibility. So Amble is really starting to do some great stuff, with dry water already. They've been doing it for ages and ages, and they're going out of their building into the town and the region, and they're using all their international experience that they've broadened, and then bringing that to this small town. And so you suddenly get that sense of dynamism that everyone can be part of. So if you take that approach and actually really start to think about that connection, you're then much bigger than just thinking about it as just a nice to have art experience. You're talking about it in terms of a much bigger perspective. And that's my wish, because I haven't seen it, and I don't think it's here yet, but the potential is really here. And I think we don't need to replicate what others are doing. I think we can just do it in a different way, and innovate and do something different. So
Yeah.
I guess that's where I'm coming
Yeah.
from.
Yeah, and it's like, and it's those fresh eyes, isn't it? You've been here a year, you've kind of followed your nose a bit with it, and kind of met people and talked to people, and started to understand the cold spots, how people work, the nature of how hyper local our culture is in Northumberland. It's been really interesting for me. I've worked in Northumberland now for 8 years, and so I've worked with a lot of the organisations and venues, most of them, to be honest, and a handful of artists. A lot of artists I would bring in from the wider region, and they would come into pockets of Northumberland, and we would do project work together funded by Arts Council. What's been really challenging for me as a creative producer, and within the Culture Northumberland project as well, is that we can do some brilliant work and then it all dissipates, it's gone. And it's very, very difficult to build sustainable culture in Northumberland. We've got various different challenges depending on which part of the county you want to hold the magnifying glass on. So obviously, if we're looking at Blyth, Ashington, Bedlington, around southeast Northumberland, we had a brilliant project that was a Creative People and Places project for 10 years in that space, and lots of brilliant work happened, but it couldn't then be sustained. There wasn't a way to sustain it, either from Arts Council's point of view or from any of the cultural venues. So there is some legacy for sure, but there was no way to sustain that level of engagement. And that's what those people need. They need that contact time. They need that engagement in the arts, because there was it's a cold spot, right? There just isn't that cultural currency. There isn't that kind of cultural appreciation, the depth of what culture can do and what's possible with culture. So a lot of what is building up and has built up has been this kind of appreciation of bits of culture, and then a deep loss actually, that was there and now it's gone. So rather than, you know, someone having a cultural venue that's within walking distance, we've got huge areas where they just don't have any culture at all and no cultural buildings whatsoever. And so we're relying on parents and schools of children and young people, families, people to try and drive people to come in and out of cultural experiences from festivals and events, special projects, that sort of thing. And it's complicated. You know, that the bait project I mentioned, that was 10 years of investment of people and place and money and culture and brilliant artists and all of that sort of stuff, and a wealth of brilliant experiences. So with the Culture Northumberland project, just to kind of take us back to 2020, it came from a place where another freelancer and I, Jason Thompson, he's a filmmaker, he's a Newbiggin by the sea. We were saying we don't feel like we communicate very well as freelancers. So there's Northeast Cultural Freelancers, which are a CIC, and they are now focused to bring in conversations to support all freelancers, all creative freelancers in the Northeast. But Northumberland has some very specific and diverse challenges that are pretty much only in Northumberland. So we wanted to try and find a way to support artists, freelancers and creatives, and also to bring together more of the conversation around what might be possible if we work together more strategically, how we could learn from each other's process, how we could learn from each other's evaluations, how we could build capacity. And some of that has worked relatively well. We've been able to draw bits and bobs of funding from Creative UK. We've been able to run pilot projects. We've been able to work with each other. We've been able to be funded for our time to kind of network and come together and discuss really important topics. But again, it dissipates. So that all goes on. And then we have to work so hard in our little kind of solopreneur bubble that all of the networking, it's like it's been 6 months or a year since we've caught up with someone. We can't find a way to work strategically with each other longer term. We can do things like cultural co-working. In Hexham, it's very, very successful. They get between 14 and 20 people every time, and that works really well. In Alnwick, you know, we get 1 or 2. Up in Berwick, they get, you know, 3, 4, 5, and there's a huge regeneration project going on at Berwick at the moment. But all of these places have very unique ways of delivering and being in culture. And so with the Culture Northumberland brand, all I can do is be really sympathetic to who I'm speaking to, whether that's a venue host or an organisation or somebody that just didn't get their Arts Council application and doesn't know how they're going to pay their rent. But everybody has such unique challenges, and then nobody can support each other at the minute because of the cost of living crisis. So venues can't support the artists, and the artists are being asked from Arts Council to bring match funding, so they can't support the buildings either, although they can make the culture if they get the money. So it's a very, very complicated scene, but that's me being quite real and negative around everything that we've been trying to do and create space for over the last 3 years. And I'm still very open to this entrepreneurial, where are we going to get our new entrepreneurial spirit? Where are we going to diversify the income? Where are we going to save culture, I guess is what I'm asking. And I'm not necessarily asking you that question, but I also am asking you that question. How do we save it? What do we do?
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think if Northumberland is to really take advantage of, there's so many artists here, and some of them are really brilliant. I know you've met a lot of them, but one that comes to mind is Gillian Lee Smith. She's an international artist. She's getting stuff in the Royal Academy at Scotland, and she's got people from Scotland, from the USA and India and Australia coming over. They're really good at what they're doing. So when I've lived in different parts of the UK and I came from London, so I've seen some really great stuff, and there's some really good artists here, but I don't think we know about them. They're quiet, because they're not able to have a voice here, and so I think there's also a lack of infrastructure. So I think what you've talked about is that idea of supporting each other as freelancers. I think one of the challenges is, if we are to really realize the possibility and the potential that we have here for artists, not only just to be in employment, to actually have careers out of it, but also to have the advantages for the regeneration and all those other benefits for culture and health and all of that. We need to think about how we value the artists, because they're the ones to enable this to happen. If we just want the nice bits, but without them having that sense of, it's not just funding, it's actually realizing that they're businesses. They are micro businesses for sure, but they're businesses. That means that they've got to produce the stuff and sell it and market it and do all the admin and do everything. Without that investment around them being businesses, I think we're not going to realize the potential, because when you don't have studio space, which I think is around here is particularly an issue, that's affordable, because you're competing with there's not many buildings around. There's a lot of land, but there's not many buildings around. So therefore, as artists, you're competing with other commercial outlets who have much more ability to generate greater income quicker. So therefore, they can pay the higher rent. So you're trying to create studio space with very little space around and options around. So if we can start to share the possibility of artists with people outside the sector and help them understand, because at the moment they've got no reason to understand the role of artists and the power of artists. I think, classically, artists are seen as a nice to have, but of course what I'm trying to present is they're not just a nice to have, they're a necessity, because if we're going to think about changing things and changing aspirations and creating more jobs and all that, you need creativity. You need to be able to really engage with that right brain, and artists are a huge opportunity to help people think broader, bigger, more ambitious. So if we're going to enable them to help the whole of communities and localities really deepen their possibility and their potential and sustainability, we also need to make sure that artists are more sustainable. So there's something around clarity of the power of culture and art to those outside the sector, because what I'm seeing is it just stays within the art sector. Even when there's exhibitions, there's nowhere really to market the exhibitions, and there's hardly any exhibition space around if you do it traditionally. But you just see that artists go and support other artists, because there's no one really knows about the stuff, and it's not so accessible. So my argument would be, let's break it out of just the art sector. So if you get Arts Council money, how can you leverage that money to attract more that's in a different place? So you're not just looking at it as just one stream of income that then has a lifetime on or a tenure for that fund. How can you leverage it and actually enable that diversification to happen? And then you can start to think about, well, then let's innovate. Let's not just do the traditional exhibitions where people have to come into a building and look at something on a wall. How can you make it come alive? And when you don't have the foundations like that you have elsewhere, you don't have many foundations here. You don't have to replicate what others have done. You can actually advance it. You can move it forward, and you can do storytelling in a much more dynamic way. So I think it then opens up, it's a challenge, but it opens up more possibilities. Yeah. But you do need that infrastructure there, which is what I think you've alluded to.
Yeah, and I think, what you're talking about there as well is something where we as a sector already appreciate the art, the artists, the people that bring creativity to life and show us it. But outside of that, people would see that as an experience, and so sometimes our language can just be quite alienating. Like, a positive experience can be had, when art or creativity is at the heart of it. And if we're talking about experiences and people having experiences, and less about art in the traditional way or art within buildings or art on gallery walls, that feels quite exciting. And that feels like something we can say quite positively to Arts Council. Actually, what we lack in infrastructure and in buildings and in studio spaces, we have innovated in terms of how we are still able to do some of this work and bring it to people. So yeah, I think some of the things that have stood out in my mind, especially, you know, things that I saw earlier in my career, most of them abroad, but not all of them, some of them in Newcastle and London, weren't in traditional venues. And that felt really exciting to be part of, because I was feeling something that was an enhanced experience. So my expectation of going into these spaces, but I am culturally confident. So then we have the whole issue, don't we, of cultural confidence and how we instill that from an early age. And if it's not there, try and encourage people to make friends with culture, I think is what I'm saying, and to say that it is for them, that it's not just for people who are privileged or people who work in the sector, that there is space for everybody to engage in culture.
I think that's right, because art's not passive, is it? If art connects to your creativity and it connects to you, it's not a passive experience. So, you know, you're actually creating something, but also creating an experience, and it can shift people's perceptions and it can move people along. But that takes vision and that takes some experience to understand how to do that. But I think it can also be super tangible. So I think it's about saying it can't just be project by project by project, because there's no sustainability. You do need project by project just to demonstrate the potential and the power of it, but you also need that real infrastructure and that understanding that art is also about enterprises and running businesses. So there is and I think artists need to see themselves that way as well. You know, I think it's the language stuff can get lost. So, you know, regeneration and government can put out, you know, we support small businesses and and I think artists don't understand the language, so they don't see themselves in that space. And certainly, you know, the more traditional funders for business startups and developments, they really don't see art as business because they don't get the language. So there's absolutely something about that coming together of language and understanding that there's also investment possibilities, because you're talking about tourism, you're talking about a sense of place, you're talking about, you know, really addressing some systemic challenges that you get in traditional communities. So what does that look like? And that takes a whole range of different minds coming together, but also it's reminding people, artists, to take themselves seriously as also business leaders. They are leaders of their own small businesses, and they need to be able to step more confidently into that and shout about it a bit more, because art, as we know, is also about sales, and it's about running a whole range of diversity of income stuff, but it's also about being artists, you know, creating stuff from within to see what comes out and innovating, experimentation. And that you need some safety to do that. And I think there's something about a wraparound that we can offer for the artists to enable them to thrive in that level of uncertainty with greater ease than they currently are operating, which is why they operate in silos, because they have to hunker down to try and enable themselves to move on.
To make a living. Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting just leaning into that. And I'm reminded of a call that we did, a public call, which we called If Not Now, Then When? And it was about diversification of income as an artist and the opportunities that the pandemic had brought. Just for us to witness how other people were taking up space online, mostly, you know, online sales, like Gillian Lee Smith. So Yvette Jar was part of the conversation, a writer called Danielle Byrne, and Beth, who works with me at Culture Northumberland, who's also self-published a couple of books. And we were just having a really gentle conversation around what those people had done to be innovative around seeing themselves as business owners as well as creatives who were based in Northumberland. And that conversation, I didn't realize it at the time, but it was quite ahead of its time, because I'm still referencing it now, all of these years into the future, and I'm still trying to support people as a mentor, but also just to try and kind of help people to see things in new ways, to, like you say, to see themselves as solopreneurs, to see themselves as creative business owners, and to shift away from looking to external funding sources or organizations that are already oversubscribed and struggling, and see if there's anything that can come from within. And I think that when that shift has been made successfully, the artists shift from being a commissioned artist across any art form to being a business owner and actually looking for more opportunities to collaborate. So it's almost like there'll be some sort of amazing diagram, I'm sure, that we could look at that kind of shows the impact that actually being able to drive your own cash sales brings to your confidence of you feeling not only safe in the world, but important and creative. And then the other commissions then start coming back, and you make more time for kind of going into schools again or collaborating with partners. So it is happening gently, but it's not happening very quickly, especially given that we've seen it modeled so strongly through the pandemic, because obviously we all instantly went online. So I am curious about that. I'm also curious about the hyperlocal and what our responsibility and influence and inspiration could be from the places that we spend the most time in Northumberland, because they are very, very inspiring places, and the people and the fabric of how those places live and work is also really inspiring to practice.
Well, I guess back to the small businesses, I really agree with that. I think the challenge is one person or it can't do everything because they won't have the skill to do everything. So I think there is something collectively that we can do, so we can market our area or the county as a place where artists are, and we can market some of the work that happens on behalf of the artists, because that's where the shared support comes from, and all the admin and the paperwork and all that, which takes people away from producing it. So they are absolutely, I completely agree about diversifying the income and finding different ways to sell it. But I do think there are things that we can do collectively to support individuals with their endeavor to be more self-sustaining. The other thing, I guess, is we need to, you talk about that sort of locality and stuff. I think we need to think about what it is that we need and we want, not just as art, but as communities and as a county. So there will be a whole range of priorities that other lenses will be looking at, whether it's from health or employment or whatever it may be. And it's understanding, starting to think about what role can creativity and art play in those other priorities. And then artists can not just be so commercial, it's all about sales. They can also just be artists to start to navigate and experiment in a different way to advance those other priorities that will shift things in a way that no one else can, because they've got a different understanding of where they're using different parts of their brain. They're using the right brain, and we are, and business is traditionally really left brain, really logical, really linear, which is really and driven, which has been so successful. But now we've got to adapt and change and respond so quickly to this world that we're operating in. That takes that more right brain side to start to enhance and develop across communities. So how can we look at it again slightly differently to enable that hyper local, but to have a much more regional, county-wide, national impact? So it's starting to what we got, but it's understanding the whole in order to know, well, actually, if I do invest in these artists and enable them to grow as businesses, and I do start to think about bringing in the tourism people and everything to start to do that marketing, we do put on big events where really top artists can show their work and bring the right audiences, because there's a lot of money around in this area now, but they don't know about it either. And I think they want it. They want to be able to support the artists, but we need to be able to bring the two together in a way that actually marries it up. So to say to the artist just to get on and do it yourself because there's huge potential, I think is a bit of a miss, because I think they're always going to be struggling to do that on their own, because they can't do everything, certainly at pace. You know, it will just evolve and evolve and evolve. And it's really, as we know, you know, if you start from that base, you can probably go to that base. But if you're starting from that base, you can go to that base much quicker. So it's understanding the really pinch points that we can all engage in, I think, to enable it to happen.
And I wonder if we're talking about platforms and showcasing opportunities and collaborations and that sort of world, where there's an infrastructure to showcasing, or there's an infrastructure to platforms, which could be in real life as part of festivals and events, like you say, but it also could be online. This has been a strand that's come up in some other conversations, whether there's something that can be done that is relatively light touch, but enables a bigger platform and an artist to kind of develop more in-depth relationships with the people who buy their art or want to buy their art or are interested in them and their process as an artist. Yeah, I just wonder about that, whether it is because of the nature of how we tend to work that we haven't put ourselves or thought about a big enough platform, because there haven't been those opportunities physically in person, but also we haven't thought about that online potentially. I don't know.
Well, for me, I guess that's where my head goes to, in terms of my experiences, you know, and I'm thinking, well, can I help in that space? And Wendy has got, you know, she's got such a wide remit, you know, doing an amazing job, but huge remit. So how can we enable her and support her, you know, to expand what she does? And or is there, you know, an alternative way that we can start to think about maybe producing things? So that, you know, that's what I'm exploring at the moment. Just starting with, you know, a small group of artists, just to see where we can produce something and demonstrate and show something different. And what does that look like, and how can we maybe attract a different audience? That's going to take a bit of time to run through, but there are all sorts of ideas and ways that we can do it. So we could just say, well, strategically we need to sort of have a bit of a clear ambition about what we're trying to do, or we just do it through these pockets of demonstration, and so people can start to see it, what it actually looks like, and what it means.
Yeah, and that's what Arts
better
Council were,
way.
yeah, Arts Council were really keen on that when I met with them, and I explained the volume of what I was holding and the ambition of what I wanted to do and why. And a lot of it's representational as well, because you can't be a project called Culture Northumberland and not be representational. That just doesn't make any sense to me. But actually what they're saying is there's a step before that, and the step before that is to be really focused, really strategic, quite small scale, and to test something in a space that you think is really ready for that, drawing on all the evidence of the partnership conversations that you've had. And so that was super helpful to me, actually, because I've worked on a lot of big ambitious bids, you know, and that's where my brain goes. So my brain goes into the wider vision, and if we're doing a model of something here, we may as well always do that in multiple other places, and that means that everywhere, you know, pretty much is represented. And actually they just don't see it like that. But they also don't have the same geographical boundaries that we might. They don't see the north the same way that we see the north. The north is anywhere north of Manchester, so it doesn't matter if I'm speaking about somewhere very specific in Northumberland and the transport challenges that that place faces. It just isn't seen in that same way. And then obviously we've got the devolution deal coming in and the lobbying for culture to be on that agenda. So at the moment, there isn't a strand that looks at culture. So culture needs to be part of other agendas. So whether that's health and social care, mental health, well-being, sense of place, but it needs to be discussed, and it also needs to be understood. And that's tough. That's really tough. I know, because I've had a lot of those conversations where they've fallen on deaf ears, and I'm just cautious, I guess, because the infrastructure in my 20 plus years of career has never been this fragile, never. So I'm like looking to people who've had longer under the belt of careers and seen more shifts and changes and going, are we okay? Because this doesn't feel okay, actually. I don't feel okay. My colleagues don't feel okay. And actually, you know, how can you create if you're in survival mode? How can you keep innovating if you're in survival mode? You could do it for a while, but you're not going to do it forever. So it's a bit of a negative picture there, Rebecca. Sorry, but I do want to be really frank and honest in this conversation with you and get your expertise and knowledge too.
I think that's right. I think there is a fragility there. I think there's a lack of understanding, because I think there's such a drive to try and bring about change. And again, for me, it's about raising our voices in a way that can be heard. You know, artists are really good at communication and stuff, but it's thinking about the audience. So thinking about who it is that we're talking about, because otherwise you just hear the same voices. You know, the usual suspects sort of raise their head and try and take control and lead and all of that stuff. But there are so many more people, and I don't think people know. So on a small scale, you know, I'd really encourage all the artists to be a bit louder, you know, to really raise their voices. So I've just written a little piece for a local town newspaper. It will go out at the end of the month, just trying to profile some in International Women's Day, and in that month, trying to sort of raise the profile of some of the female creatives in the area, because people just don't even know, even on the local scale, that they're there. So I'd really encourage everyone, you know, particularly the females around, because they're also often the quieter ones, just to raise their voices and showcase what they're doing and be proud of it and not try to hide it. So then you can see there's lots of people just individually doing their amazing work. So you then start to get scale. And then on the other hand, when you work with, certainly around the devolution agenda and, you know, combined authorities and all of those things that are going on, it's being able to articulate it in a language that they understand. So it will be sounding harder nosed and harder edged and very specific and very tangible. But artists can do that. They don't know that they can do that, and it will need some brokering to enable that to happen. But also it's then not enable, it's encouraging those that are not from the sector to not impose how to do something. So you might want to agree an outcome. You know, it might be, we want to increase employment, we want to attract more tourists, we might want to. It's not then saying, and we need you to do it this way, because the artists will have their own way of doing it. So that's where it's got to be grassroots up and big vision, big expectation about what might be possible, and then the two need to come together. You need that adaptability and flexibility. Otherwise you're going to completely get those misses.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we honed in on this intention, you know, 3 years ago around profile raising, and how we were not only missing opportunities, but just found it almost excruciatingly impossible to raise our own profiles. So we just weren't used to being able to do that. You know, we didn't know how to do that. And that is a Northeast based culture. That's just difficult for us. When we see artists on other stages and go to international festivals and other things, that doesn't exist in the same way. So we've been really trying to plug away with this intention of what is profile raising and how do we do it? How do we learn to raise our own profiles? How do we hold the door open for others? How do we lift people up? How do we teach people social media? How do we teach people the importance of sharing process and product and voice and all those sorts of things? So there is something really chiming for me when you're talking about that work. I think it is happening slowly. Slowly. It is happening slowly. But yeah, there's something about recognizing where we are and understanding where we could go with it, I guess.
Yeah, because it's about celebration. It's about, you know, real pride in the artists that we've got in the area, because we should all be proud of so many around here. And so many then appreciating sort of the natural environment and the natural beauty. You know, the two are really, really coming together. So there's absolutely something about celebration, and encouragement and empowering people to be seen, to be more visible. And I would, you know, I'd be really keen to start to think about what that physically looks like in the, oh, there's so much development going on, you know, new houses and new estates being built, but where's the art? You know, can we have street art? Can we have visual experiences? Can we think about the designs of some of this stuff so that actually we're starting to create a sense of art is everywhere. You know, it's not just on a wall, or you know, on a tabletop or something. It's everywhere. So people start to be proud of what that looks like, and they understand the power of it. So I'd be really keen to start to blow people's minds a little bit about what art is and what it looks like, and then the impact on what that can have. That will hopefully get other people to see, oh, I see where the artists are, people will come, and people will then want to start to be part of that experience, and it creates an energy and a dynamism which then makes people proud of where they live, which means that they want to stay here, which means they want to try and find work here. And you know, so it has a whole systemic impact,
Yeah.
and it's trying to sell it that way and help people to understand it.
Yeah, brilliant. And then just to sort of close the call, I'd be really interested to hear from you in terms of next steps, and if, you know, you want people to reach out to you specifically, you know, if you have a place online that you'd like them to reach out to, or, you know, what your plans are for the rest of this year. It'd be so interesting to hear.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, always happy to hear. Always happy to hear about people that want to collaborate and do some different things. I'd be keen to do that. Keen to get involved in more strategic sort of understanding about how we can draw this all together. You know, I really understand that, you know, there's a big headline plan for the county, but what does that look like? You know, certainly around here, I don't think that's drawn together. So really up for any conversation around that bigger space. So if you want to contact me, I'm on LinkedIn, Rebecca Phillips. I'm on LinkedIn, or if you want to email me, it's rebecca@fluentconsulting.co.uk. Yeah, really open to just explore possibilities. I'm working in different spots all over the country. Do a lot of that online now, but I do go off and do stuff. But I'm really wanting to do more here because I really feel the potential. So I'm really up for, you know, and obviously supporting you, Claire, and because I don't want to duplicate anything that's already been done. I absolutely want to add value to what's already here, because I think there's some amazing stuff going on. It's how can we start to bring it all together?
Well, it looks like, because I'm towards the end of these conversations now, so it looks like there's going to be around about 7 recommendations back to the local authority, but that's also back to us. You know, it's not just us saying to the local authority, this is what we think. That's an open conversation, and us kind of, yeah, really putting time and investment into, you know, if we are recommending that this is the way that we shift our work, and this is the direction that we go in, this is what is going to be sustainable. So I'll share those with you, and we can have a further conversation and see where we end up. Yeah, but we'll stay in touch. Yeah, thanks again, Rebecca. It's been so brilliant to catch up and speak to you.
Take care.